mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Hey, check out my new tag team, baby, Monty and the Pharaoh.
Hey, Jimmy, don't forget to tell them about Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast.
Well, you know what, I would, but you already did it.
It's Monty and the Pharaoh.
With Monty and Pharaoh. The Monty and Pharaoh Show.
Monty and Pharaoh, bro.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Monty and the Pharaoh.
The Monty and Pharaoh Show.
And you're watching the Monty and Pharaoh Show.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
With Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
It's Monty and the Pharaoh.
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 Monty and Pharaoh.
It's Monty and the Pharaoh.
And Monty and the Pharaoh. Oh, is it Monty and the Pharaoh?
Yeah.
Monty and Pharaoh.
The Monty and the Pharaoh Show.
Monty and the Pharaoh. To the Monty and the Pharaoh Show. And it's Monty and the Pharaoh, baby.
Watching Monty and the Pharaoh.
With Monty and the Pharaoh. Monty and the Pharaoh. Oh, what a run.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Hey, cut music. When you want the best in professional wrestling, Long Island, there's only one place you're going to get it, right here.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Now, that's not just the coolest, and that's not just the best. That, my friends, is just incredible. Monty and the Pharaoh.
You've got the future Hall of Famer, that rocker, Marty Jannetty, and MJ in the house, and I'm sitting here with two more future Hall of Famers, Monty and the Pharaoh. We're doing that stuff, and we gonna rock it.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Duh. And this old lady who had those crow fingernails ran her fingers down my back, and brother, it hurt so bad. I went, oh! And I turned around and I said, will you sit the down?
Oh, my God.
I'm 5'8", 250. He's 7'4", 550 pounds. He's going to kick sooner or later.
All right, welcome to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast out of Indie Music TV here in Ronkonkoma, Long Island, on a special Monday edition of Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Pharaoh. We want to welcome two pro wrestling superstars, two icons in the industry, Mr. Andrew Anderson, Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Did I tell you I would bring the legendary Prince of Darkness? That I would bring the Taskmaster, the Games Master? He's known by many names, but the best way to address him is a devil.
The devil.
Kevin Sullivan.
Kevin Sullivan, an icon in the world of professional wrestling. Thank you for gracing us.
No, thank you for having me, guys.
Unbelievable.
I certainly appreciate it. And being on the #1 wrestling podcast, and it's something else. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
And Andrew, you always come through, brother.
Listen to me, man. I love you guys. You guys are my boys, man.
So you know how Pharaoh's a big wrestling fan, man.
Yep.
When he heard Kevin was coming in, marking out
man.
all the way.
I did.
It's
I did.
Kevin
Yeah,
Sullivan.
I did. And now that I've met the devil's really cool.
The thing about Andrew is, Andrew was born 15 years too early. Andrew would have been a huge star across the territorial days. He would have been, knocking on the door of the NWA champion. He would have been the Florida champion, the Georgia champion. Andrew should be working at a major company. And the problem is, and this is going to get me a lot of heat, the people writing these shows have no idea what they're doing. And I mentioned to you off camera that the three smartest guys I ever met, if they had seen Andrew, he would have been on top everywhere those three guys
Who
promoted.
were the three smartest guys?
Three smartest guys I ever met in my life was Eddie Graham, who was actually the booker for Vince McMahon Sr. The second one would be Jim Barnett. People don't understand. National TV, that we think about when national TV happened, it happened in Turner, right? 17. It happened 20 years prior to that in Chicago with Fred Kohler, who was an NWA member, and that was played every Monday and Wednesday night. But there became another NWA promoter in Chicago and played on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and his name was Schwartz. Jim Barnett had control of both of those. When I was working for Vince Sr., he used to do his TV in the arena in Philadelphia where the original Rocky was filmed. And everybody had gotten there early, and there was no big honchos in the room. And I went to his book, and I looked, and he had Hanson 3 matches. I turn over. This is the guy, two matches for Brody, 1 match for Crusher for Dew. Then I look at, he walked in. I thought I was going to be told to hit the bricks, and he said, "You like what you see?" I said, "I have no idea what I'm seeing." He said, "You want to learn?" And he said, "Come on, sit down beside me." When I sat down beside me, I had instant heat. And, they didn't want a young kid like me learning that end of the business.
What do you think made Vince Sr. trust you so quickly?
Because of Eddie, because my relationship with Eddie. And the unique thing was because I didn't start there. I was a local boy and didn't start because there was great local talent like Johnny Rods. When Johnny went to L.A. and was Java Rook, he drew nothing but money. Vince didn't like, it wasn't that he didn't like local guys, but he used those great local talents on the mid and lower cards, but he brought in people on the top. I had worked for Vince on a couple of weeks on my vacation when I used to go home to Boston, and he would put me over in the little towns, so they got to know me a little. But I think it was because of Eddie. It was. My job was I beat the guys that Bruno had wrestled on the way out, like Sparasarion, other guys like that, Crusher for Dew, Blackwell. On the way out, I beat them, and I would do the job for Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody, because I think Eddie talked to him and said the kid knows his position. And I understood what my position was. My position was to be there, learn, and also learn the business, not just the wrestling business, but the manipulation of the wrestling business.
Absolutely. You mentioned Mike Graham twice.
Yeah.
Mike seemed to be really intelligent. And number two, you mentioned he's a very close friend of yours. Did you know Mike was having the problems he was having when that all went down?
Yeah. Unfortunately, you put it together after the fact. Mike had a podcast, and it was the 13th podcast he had, and he called me, and I did his podcast, and Mike and I were close. We were just practically raised together. We were kids. We were 20 years old together. And Mike was very, very tough. I mean, I wrestled Mike amateur. First time I got there, in Florida, his dad talked to me. He says, "Have you had any amateur wrestling ability?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." He said, come down to Hiro Matsuda's tomorrow. I want you to work out with Mike. I was smart enough to hold my own, but I was smart enough to realize the kid had to go over. And he respected that. And when I left the territory, Mike would fly himself in. He would have, but the promoters would pay for it. And Mike would go around every territory I ever worked for after I left Florida and put me over in the middle of the ring.
Wow.
And that was something. And after the 13th, and we had a love relationship, but we never said, hey, I love you, man, like I do to Andrew and hug him. After I did the podcast, he called me back and said, man, you know I love you. And I said, yeah, I know you love me, Mike. He said, no, you know I really love you. And I said, yeah, I know that, Mike. He said, I love you. And he hung up the phone. And my wife and Mike were good friends. And I told her what she said. She said, there's something wrong. I could tell you stories about the three of us and going out and partying. She said, you better call him again. And I called him up and I said, you okay? He said, yeah, I'm okay. His son had just committed suicide like a year later. His wife told me he's wearing his son's boots. I thought, this is not good, you know what I mean? I should have done more. I feel like I have been a victim of suicide in my family with my father. I felt like maybe I should have done more with Mike, should have gone there. And you got to realize this, not many people know this. Mike committed suicide with a gun. His father committed suicide with a gun. His son committed suicide with a gun. His grandfather committed suicide with a gun. And his uncle committed suicide with a gun. Wow. So it runs in the genes. And I don't have many regrets in life. And I don't think you can look back like Satchel Paige. I'm a huge baseball fan. You know, Satchel Paige once said, can't look back, something may be gaining on you. But of all the things I feel like I should have looked back on was that one.
Kevin, I feel for you. That was a tough story.
That was deep.
I've never told that story ever.
Yeah. Hey, if I can be honest real quick, I don't know what you were supposed to really do.
I don't know either.
What on earth were you supposed to do? I mean, genetically, like you spoke of, it was, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Everybody told me, well, the promoter said, you got to be a Russian. Put me in the business my rookie years with Nikolai Volkov, which was great. Listen, I have no regrets. I wouldn't change a thing. They put me with Nikolai, and they made me a Russian. And I remember Mikey Nova telling me after an ECW show, after an ECW show and a Jersey All Pro Wrestling show, saying, what are you doing? The Cold War's dead. He goes, you're an Anderson. You got to be an Anderson. Look at you. And that's how it changed.
I knew you couldn't take a guy by his hair and bail him out of a corner.
You can't?
And I used to watch the wrestling and go to it because I enjoyed seeing the guys. And I was willing to check my disbelief at the door when I bought a ticket.
Sure.
The Sheik came to town.
Oui.
I'm sitting there, and he came out, and I felt the building move. I said, I don't give a that's all fake. That guy's real.
Yeah.
I said, that guy's real. Mm-hmm. Years later, he became one of my dearest friends in pro wrestling. I almost got my big tattoo of the Sheik on my arm. Thank God I didn't when he hired me, right? Oh, thank you for paying me. Yeah, he said, your pay's cut in 1/3, you know what I mean? I work with Andre quite a bit, and I didn't realize how much I worked with him until I looked at a book that said Florida Championship Wrestling from 70 to 85. What I used to do was I used to send a bottle of Crown Royal over to Andre before I worked with him. And Andre and I were good friends, and I'll tell you how we became good friends. But Andre, one night, came down to Orlando. It's the only time I ever fell out of character. He came down, and my deal was when I wrestled Andre, I got to the ring first. He came down. I attacked him, dove through the ropes, attacked him. I didn't dive. I jumped and attacked him. And I posed him, and that night he got blood for me. And I was on top of him, beating the out of him. And this old lady who had those crow fingernails ran her fingers down my back. And, brother, it hurt so bad. I went, oh! And I turned around and I said, will you sit the down?
Oh, my God.
I'm 5'8", 250. He's 7'4", 550 pounds. He's going to kick sooner or later.
Quit picking on the big guy.
Yeah, so what we would do with that was we'd stay on the floor for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I beat him pillar and a post, but he was always down. Finally, he'd make that comeback where he punched me a few times, threw me in the ring, and when he stepped over the ropes, I made sure I was on my knees. So the height difference like that, and I would go, no, and then we'd go home. It was a magician act.
You were able to play big. Guys like Piper, right?
yeah,
Piper, what did Piper weigh? 210?
Maybe.
Wow. Savage.
Really?
Savage, right?
Wow.
Maybe 210?
Maybe.
Pre-Savage,
Yeah,
right?
and-
Pre-Juice Savage.
Savage and I used to go to bodybuilding contests, and we were down to almost nothing.
So here's my
man.
question. These guys played so big. When Piper wrestled Hogan, you believed Piper could beat
Yeah.
Hogan.
Yeah.
Why can't today's wrestler play big?
I think they're trying to do too much. They're trying to do too much. If you look at Piper would throw those punches, and who was attacking you. He was attacking you. And you're saying, wow, he's vicious. He didn't give you time to say, hey, he's 205 pounds. You know what I mean? I was in Florida for 3 years, and the guys I wrestled most of the time were Dusty Rhodes, Blackjack Mulligan, who was 6'7", Barry Windham, the greatest babyface I ever worked with, Andre the Giant, and Superstar Billy Graham. And they were nice enough to do the right thing to get me over. People actually thought that I was superhuman.
Yeah.
And the other thing they did was when I got my shoulders pinned and they got up and stumbled around the ring, I got my heat back. I made sure that I could do a job every night, but the next week it's going to be a tape fist match. The week after that, he's going to be in a cage. He's going to finally get his comeuppance. And that's the difference today is I don't think, and I hope I may be talking out of turn if I insult anybody. I don't want to. But one of the things Vince McMahon taught me was, when I looked at his book, he had January and he had December booked, the top 3 matches.
Wow.
My wife is an author, and I asked her, how do you do a book? She said, you got to get the ending first, and the beginning comes second. I think they're doing not only the beginning, but week by week by week, and they're not sticking with someone if it doesn't work. How Backlund became champion? No. I'm there. I was a surrogate son.
Okay.
I fished. Do you think this was a tough job? I'm Mike Graham's partner and his best friend, and his father's flying me to towns, and Mike is driving. Okay?
Yeah.
Because I knew a secret that nobody else knew, except Terry Funk and Jim Barnett.
And Monty and the Pharaoh in about 1 minute.
Yeah. So, Eddie calls me one day and said, let's go fishing. We used to fish a lot. He said, let's go fishing. Be at the office at 11 o'clock. I come up, 11 o'clock. I'm talking. He said, let's go. Phone rings. The story you just said is exactly the truth. But Eddie says, no, the guy you want, because his tag team partner was Steve Kern. He said, the guy you want is Steve Kern. You need to go with Kern because Kern's a better speaker.
Wow.
Okay?
So, not to interrupt, so he's looking for someone, and is he looking for Backlund?
He's looking for Backlund because he's watched the TV.
Gotcha, but he's like, no, Kern's the guy.
Kern's the guy because they were tag team partners.
Understood.
They were the Florida Tag Team Champions. And Eddie said, no, Vince, I think you're making a mistake. And he said, Eddie, I'll get him over. He says,
Which should Steve Kern have become WWF champion?
I think knowing what he knows now, Superstar Billy Graham should have never lost that belt.
The difference was, I love Steve Kern. He's one of my dearest friends. We grew up, him, me, and Mike. Nobody at that period was as charismatic as Superstar Billy Graham. The greatest interviews of all times. My greatest interviews, my list is King Curtis. There's nobody that topped King Curtis, okay? Everybody stole for King Curtis. Then it's Superstar Billy Graham, Dusty Rhodes, Blackjack Mulligan, and Hulk Hogan. Superstar should have turned babyface against Ivan Koloff, Stars and Stripes.
So, but I ask you then, you said your top three, Vince Sr. was in your top three smartest guys.
Right.
Why didn't Vince Sr. have the foresight to say, look, Superstar's he's already turning face regardless what's already happening?
Because he was the most honorable man I ever met in the wrestling business. He told Bob the day he came in and the day he was going to win the belt.
Wow.
And in my heart, he knew it was the wrong thing to do for business, but he said, I gave my word, and I'm going to keep my word. And that's why he stacked the cards, because those cards were so stacked, you don't think those guys were getting mid-card payoffs. No. You know what I mean? They were walking out of the gardens with a lot less money for Vince when Bruno was the champion or Pedro was the champion. There was times, like I said, where he had Dusty and Superstar, he had Pedro, he had Bruno.
And he had Andre.
He had Andre. I mean, he still had Calhoun. He had guys on that card and his underneath cards. And the other thing that he did, and a lot of people forget this, he was bringing in Piper, he was bringing in Flair, when they were brand new guys who were all over those magazines, like you said you guys grew up on.
When he would bring Valentine in, I'd lose my mind.
Okay, so, I mean, there it is.
How do we leave Vince McMahon Jr.'s name out of the greatest, smartest pro wrestling minds in history?
He has to be the greatest mind for wrestling entertainment. Not pro wrestling. Have you ever heard the word wrestling on that television program?
Oh, you can't say that. You get in trouble.
You don't talk about wrestling.
Andrew tried to say it the other day. He got yelled at by Vince.
I mean,
you can't say that word.
Vince took it. He took wrestling from a territorial and Connie-like atmosphere and brought it to the big screen. And Jim Barnett, without Jim Barnett, there would never have been a WWE, because Barnett knew everybody that was ever associated with professional wrestling that was a program director. When they looked at their watch, they thought about Jim Barnett, because he gave more Rolexes out to any program directors across the country. So that's how Vince got on it. Vince saw this as, we're going to make this a kiddie show. And rightfully so, he's done a remarkable, remarkable job. But as time has gone along, we used to check it in and say, well, yeah, I know it's fake, but this guy's real. They don't have anybody, this guy's real anymore, because they know, like Brock can be anybody. There isn't two guys you can match up. And this is no disrespect to them. They're worldwide but it's coming, I believe, with the ratings going down. I had stocks. The stocks are going down. He had the, what was that, football league he had?
The XFL.
There's seems to be a little bit of hanky-panky on money that was invested. I think they're in trouble. I think they're in trouble when you got. And here's, I think, what's wrong is they got so many guys. You don't know who's who. When you were growing up and going to see the Gardens, you knew Bruno, you knew who he was going to wrestle. You knew the entire card. Now, there's so many guys, and they're either gone quickly or they're there forever.
Well, and what did Eric Bischoff say?
This was the smartest thing I've heard in years. I asked Eric, why do you think wrestling's down? He said, CNN and Fox. They're doing wrestling better than we did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's right.
You got the heel.
We got a heel and babyface.
You're right.
It doesn't matter.
Left or right, it doesn't matter. People are glued.
They're glued, and I said...
Except I took you guys serious. I don't take either. Never mind.
And let's not forget this either. Trump's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
He's a worker.
I mean, he's working it to the max, and him and Vince are very close. Linda's on the cabinet. There's something going on, and they're doing it better than we did.